Hey folks, welcome back to this episode. We've got a really great episode for you. What is it, you might ask? Well, stick around and find out.
And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button that you will put somewhere on here.
Probably
right?
down there.
Down there?
Yeah,
right.
down there.
Down there.
Yeah. Hey folks, welcome back. Joining us today in our brand new kitchen tent in our encampment at the Maine Renaissance Faire is the world famous cookbook author and medieval cook Allyson Szabo.
Hi everyone.
So, for those of you who don't know who she is, can you tell them what you do?
Sure.
And please don't cut your fingers off this time.
No cutting. They're all there.
They're all there.
This time.
All 10.
Okay.
So I have been doing reenacting for about 6 years, and I got asked to cook food for some people, and I went and researched a recipe, and everybody loved it. And then I started doing more of that, and eventually somebody said, "Do you sell cookbooks?" And I was going to make just a, like a church cookbook where, you just put it in spiral binding. And then the pandemic hit. So during my pandemic, I wrote a cookbook. So when people ask, I can say I actually wrote the book on it. I do a variety of periods, but mostly 14th century, and the cooking that I'm doing is out of 12th through 15th century period cookbooks.
Any particular country or countries?
I mix and match, but I try to stick mostly to England.
Okay.
I do have a few German recipes because they're yummy and a little different, and I have 2 Middle Eastern recipes because I love working with curry.
Now, do you update the recipes for modern, or are they close to the originals?
So it depends on the recipe. Some of them are very much exactly as they would have been, but medieval recipes don't come with amounts.
Right.
So what I've done is taken the original recipes, redacted them, which means taking them from the Middle English and with no amounts and turning them into something that a modern cook could use, and written it up in a modern format, but it's all the original stuff. And then there's stuff like today, which I'm doing chicken with fruit, and that is based on 2 different recipes. One is out of Germany and one is out of England, and it's kind of my own twist on it, but it's based on historical finds.
So something that they could have had in time period, just
not exact.
Right.
Because they didn't really write down, recipes weren't written down until the 1600s. It was just assumed everybody knew how to cook. It was a life skill, so literally everybody cooked.
And like I would imagine nowadays with family recipes that get handed down, that there's going to be some areas that have their own unique twist or take on it based
Correct.
on personal tastes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you mentioned your cookbook. What's the name of the cookbook?
It is called the Re-enactors Cookbook. I think you've got a copy there. It's available on Amazon.
It looks like it has quite a few recipes in it.
I believe there's about 100 recipes in there. I actually
Wow.
haven't counted them. There's also a ton of footnotes. One of the things that I did when I wrote the cookbook was I wrote it in such a way that it was accessible to anybody, including a new person who was just starting cooking. But there's links, you can follow the bibliography back to the original unredacted recipes in most cases. So if you want to go and be a food nerd, food historian, you can go back and actually look at the originals and see how I modernized them. There are a few things, one of the Middle Eastern recipes that I have in the cookbook uses a squash that we don't have. So the closest thing we have to it is the green zucchini.
So you mean it's a squash that is no longer around, or a squash that we just don't have here in this country?
So my understanding is that if you're in England and you know the right people, you can still get it, but it's not easy, and you definitely can't get it in North America.
So it's like an heirloom type. Okay. Now, what are you preparing today for us?
So today I'm going to be doing chicken with fruit, and this is chicken that is stuffed with a variety of fruits. I have some fresh fruits, so today I'm using apples and pears.
Any particular types of apples, or just whatever you could get?
It was whatever I could get, and at the time, this is the time of year when they would have been using the end of the stores from last year, so they wouldn't have been using fresh apples. They probably would have been using dried.
Right.
But it could be early apples or crab apples.
Mm-hmm.
But you can use any kind. I like putting a little bit of fresh fruit in this just because it adds some liquid and it makes it taste very good.
Right.
I have dates and figs.
How much quantity are we looking at?
So I have 2 3-pound chickens that are going to be in the cast iron cooking.
Okay.
And I'll be using basically all of the fruit that you see here, and 2 of the apples.
All right.
2 pears.
So what do we have here? Because I know the viewers can't really see.
Well, we have dried apricots.
Okay.
Which is perfectly pureed and quite tasty for snacking on.
And you can still get that at your local grocery store
Yep.
or so forth.
Market Basket Shaw's.
In this area. We're in New England, folks.
We have raisins,
Yep.
which were used all the time. I like golden raisins, and there is no evidence to tell us whether they had dark or light raisins in period. I like the golden ones. I have dried figs and dried dates, both of which were available at the time. I'm using some onion, some leek.
What type of onion are you chopping up right now?
This is just a regular onion.
Like a white onion?
It's yes, it's a yellow onion.
Yellow, okay.
I'm going to be using leek because leek and onion are related, but they have a slightly different flavor, and when you're cooking the chicken, the flavors blend very nicely. I have kale for another dish that I'm making later in the week, and parsley, which will just be on the top of the chicken.
Okay.
I use a variety of spices when I'm cooking the chicken. When I put it over the top, I hand grind it using my mortar and pestle, and I'll be using cubebs, which are kind of a medieval pepper, but they don't have any heat. Black pepper has a little bit of heat or spice to it. Cubebs have no heat at all.
Now, where can someone get those?
This one I got online, but you can go to most houseware stores and you can get wood ones and ceramic ones even at Walmart or...
Okay, so for the mortar and pestle you can get that, but what about the cubebs?
So spices, you can go to, if you're in New England, you can go to Monadnock Oil and Vinegar, which is a really awesome store. They don't always have them on display, but if you ask, they can get them. And Auntie Arwen's, who is one of our vendors here at the fair.
They do have a website, and we will be doing a video with them later on.
And we'll put the link down below.
Yeah.
Auntie Arwen's has a lot of fun stuff, and you can order online, which is nice.
They have a lot of spices that you would find back then.
That's correct.
Okay.
And some things like cardamom and ginger and nutmeg you can probably find in your local grocery store.
Yep.
The stranger ones, you need to go to a specialty store. I will be honest, I use Auntie Arwen's a lot.
Now this recipe is in your cookbook?
This recipe is in my cookbook.
Okay, so buy her cookbook and you can get the recipe.
There you go.
How's that for a plug?
Works for me.
All right, so what else are we doing with this recipe?
This recipe will get put into we'll get the fire going.
Yep.
And then we're going to put the chicken in and let it start to sizzle a little bit, just so it browns on the bottom. And then we're going to put in the fruit.
Around it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Originally, they probably stuffed it, but I find that when we stuff it, people don't eat the stuffing, but when we put it around the side, it makes it very tasty. So that's how I'm doing it now.
Okay.
And it is very good. So we'll have the fruit around with a little bit of chicken broth. You can also use a red wine, but I'm not doing that today because we're at a fair and I didn't want to do that in front of kids. We'll be putting it over the fire and bringing it to a boil, and then I'll be pulling it off to the side, and it will be simmering all day. So what'll happen is, as the fire goes down to coal, I'll pull the coals over to the cast iron and surround it, and that heats up the cast iron and keeps the whole thing going.
Now, how long do you keep it boiling? Do you just get it to boil and then bring it over to simmer, or
I usually bring it to a boil and then I put it onto a simmer, and
Okay.
it only stays boiling for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
It's just to bring it up to temperature, especially when you're doing it over a fire. It helps to make sure that your chicken gets thoroughly cooked.
And we will show you, when we show you the setup, how you can adjust your heat over an open fire. Because if you're like me and hadn't cooked over a fire, you think it's all going to be just sitting in the middle. How do you adjust the temperature? And there are a couple of different ways in which she does that. It's kind of an inventive thing that they had back in the time.
Very awesome new technology for the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what else are you doing today?
Today I'm also going to be doing some beans with onions and garlic.
Okay.
It's going to be for those of our company who are not meat eaters.
Right.
The beans I'm using are lima beans. They would have used fava beans at the time, but fava beans are a little difficult to find right now. I looked and there was no love, so we're going to go with lima beans. They're pretty close. And basically what you do is you get a little bit of oil in the bottom of your pan, you throw in your onions, saute them, throw in your garlic until it starts to smell beautiful, maybe about a minute, and then you throw in the beans and a little bit of sausage, stir it away, and it's a very quick meal, but it's tasty and it's fast and delicious and very hearty.
So if you're like me and you do not cook, it does sound like if there's something in the recipe you just don't want to eat, you can substitute it for something you might be more willing to eat or can find more readily at your stores and get that same feel or the idea of having a period dish.
That's right. So if you're doing a period stew like I did last week, if you're sticking to just medieval stuff, you can't use potatoes,
Right.
can't use tomatoes, sweet peppers, bell peppers, all out, because those of course were deadly nightshades and you don't want to feed those to your friends because they could die. So instead we would thicken with things like barley, lentils, and dried peas.
Cool. So let's take a look at her setup that she has here. She's got a bunch of displays in the kitchen tent.
So we have a variety of spices here. Some are going to be familiar and some will be unknown. Poudre forte, which means strong powder, and poudre douce, which means sweet powder, are both medieval spice blends that were common. Depending on where you were in the world, you might have different additions to it. There's more pepper in poudre forte and more things like cinnamon and nutmeg in poudre douce, but they're used quite frequently. I'll be using the poudre forte on our chicken today. I have ginger, cubebs, nutmeg and cloves, cardamom, nigella, which is a fun little, it's a seed and it's almost it tastes like a caraway seed but without the licorice flavor. And I grind these all up in my mortar and pestle until they're a nice fine powder, and it goes over the top of the chicken or into whatever it is that I'm cooking. And it's quite tasty and it's very fun to do. I also have a king's ransom in saffron, and I like to put that on the top of my chicken because it gives it a beautiful color, and saffron has a very interesting and fun flavor, and it's very medieval to me. So I also have carrots. We have today orange carrots, but of course in medieval times orange carrots didn't exist. They would have been purple or black. I have the fruit that's going into the chicken stuffing, which is apples and pears. We have dried apricots, dates, figs, and raisins, and these will all be mixed together and put around the chicken. I have barley, lentils, and dried peas for thickening and for just for sides, onions, parsley, and kale. I have leeks, which will also be going in the chicken, and lots of garlic. Here I have fresh baked bread, which I baked for the event in my cast iron. I have a darker loaf, which has more whole wheat and a little bit of rye to give it that dark color, and a lighter, which is just a straight whole wheat and a little bit of bread flour. I like to have my display of books, including my own. And basically what I have here are some of the books that I used when I was writing my own book and researching and learning how to be a period cook and cook over an open fire. To the King's Taste and To the Queen's Taste are some of the best books out there. They've taken medieval recipes and made them much more accessible to the modern cook. And they're really good, but if you're not an experienced cook, they might be a little complex. I wouldn't give these to my teenagers, for instance, to cook with. Whereas my own cookbook works very well for anybody of any level because I've done it in a very conversational way. How to Cook Forsoothly is from Penzic back in 1976, I believe. It's not entirely period, but there are a lot of fun recipes that are based on historical finds. 12 Months of Monastery Soups is, again, has modern recipes in it, but they're based and have the history in there for where they came from. They're very simple soups that would have been served to the brothers in the monasteries at the time. And they're tasty and they go together very quickly. And Plain Delight is a lovely medieval book which is similar to my own, but it crosses the borders into many different countries. There's a lot of Middle Eastern and Italian cooking in there, as well as England. So very good and very fun. Trying to get her going here. Rearrangement. Hello, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. How long will it take to cook those?
It will take about 4 or 5 hours. They cook all day. They go on very early so that it'll be ready for when my fighters are finished fighting and they're ready to eat their food.
So that's an old-fashioned slow cooker.
It is.
Very slow.
So it will only start out on top of the fire this way, and then it will eventually end up down at the side.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll pull the poles around so that it continues to simmer for a very long time. And you just turn it so that the one side is toward the fire every once in a while.
There you go.
So
I think they're coming to put your fire out.
you know, they said that last week too, but nobody did, so I guess I'm doing okay. But I mean, because I did all the test recipes in the cookbooks, I'm used to doing this. And we do a lot of cooking over an open fire. I like doing it.
Nice.
So this is chickens and fruit, and basically it's a mix of fresh and dried fruit in broth. If I was cooking it at home, I would probably put in about a cup of Cabernet Sauvignon, give it that nice rich undertone. But here at the fair I just use broth.
When are we eating that?
After the public leaves.
Oh, okay. I like that. So we hope you enjoyed the video, and we hope you really start looking into period cooking, medieval cooking. I definitely recommend buying Allyson's book or some of the other cookbooks out there that you saw today, because there's a lot of really yummy food in those videos.
And give it a try, even if you're not the best cook. As she says, hers is written so that even someone like me could make something that's edible. Try something from the past. Change up what you normally make.
So we really hope you have a really great day, and if you like what you saw and want to see the rest of the videos and stay up to it,
Like and subscribe.
we'll put it right down below.